everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Hospitable Hosts podcast. I'm your host for today, Miles Hobson, Head of Marketing here at Hospitable. Today we are speaking with Bailey Kramer, an experienced short-term rental host that has switched to focusing primarily on midterm rentals, and he's going to tell us all about his experience doing that. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Okay, hello Bailey. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hey Miles, super excited to be here. Thank you.
No worries at all. So Bailey, welcome to the podcast. For listeners that haven't heard from you before, don't know who you are, maybe you can introduce yourself and describe your rental portfolio a little.
For sure. Yeah, my name is Bailey. I am a full-time real estate investor. The short story, I started about 4 to 5 years ago, really with short-term rentals and co-hosting, and pretty much have transitioned my portfolio to midterm rentals, which I do today. I own 10 units. And the one constant that has been for the past 4 to 5 years is I've been a loyal Hospitable user. So although my portfolio and strategy has slightly shifted from short-term rentals to more midterm rentals, I've been using Hospitable since.
Nice, I like it. And so are you owning all those properties? Are you co-hosting? How does that look?
Yeah, so in the beginning, when I was doing more short-term rentals, I owned a couple of them. And then I really had my emphasis on co-hosting. So I was initially running 30 short-term rentals back in the peak of the co-hosting days. And there's no doubt that I could not have done that without Hospitable. That was a lot. But even transitioning to midterm rentals now, I don't co-host as many units anymore. I really focus on owning my own properties. So I have the 10 units that I own personally, no investors. Just me.
Nice. And the switch to midterm rentals, what was kind of the reason for that switch and kind of going, all in, quote unquote, on that?
Yeah. So when I was doing the short-term rentals, I had all my systems, my softwares, I had everything dialed in. I even had, at the peak, I would say like 3 employees that were helping me answering guest messages and basically just doing all the communication for me. So I was pretty removed for the most part. But even with all those systems, all those people, running 30 properties became a lot. More specifically, having 30 check-ins and check-outs basically every single weekend really started to add up. I think part of that was like my properties were in several different cities, several different states. So I definitely didn't make it easy on myself by any means. But it just became a lot to manage in several different places. And once I had the experience of running all those properties, I also built up enough cash myself to where I was able to be on the owning side of the business and actually own the properties. So that was always the long-term goal for me, was to actually own the properties, but co-hosting was definitely a nice gateway to get there.
Nice. Okay. And just kind of thinking about midterm rentals, obviously, I think a lot of our audience will be mostly short-term rental. Maybe they have a small part of their portfolio that are midterm. What would you say is kind of the biggest misconception that you commonly hear about midterm rentals?
Yeah, I would say the biggest misconception is people don't think that they're as profitable as short-term rentals. And obviously, it just depends on like a million factors. But what I would say is, short-term rentals on average might earn more revenue, but with the constant turnovers and the guest expectations for the property to be perfect from top to bottom, every drawer, everything, I've seen with running short-term rentals myself that yes, sometimes they bring in more revenue, especially if we're talking like a summertime vacation rental that's renting for $1,000 or $2,000 per night. Of course, you're gonna likely earn more money than if you're doing just a midterm rental. But again, it's that constant turnover that has a bunch of hidden costs in it. Or if you've been running short-term rentals for a while, they're not too hidden and you need to factor in all of these expenses.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously with midterm rentals, you don't have that same, guest turnover. So there's less work in a sense there, but I imagine there's still a lot of operational systems that you feel that you need to kind of get right to make sure it's a success still, right?
For sure. And the way I like to describe it is it's basically, I wouldn't say the same as short-term rental, but it's I would say very similar to short-term rental, just
Hmm.
like it's almost like turning down the speed. Like if you're running a short-term rental, it's like watching a video on like 5x speed. You have things moving super fast. You have to fix things fast, turnovers fast, all those things. With midterm rentals, I almost describe it as like turning it down to like 0.25 speed where it's really slow motion. So right now, like, or I guess to compare my short-term rentals, when I was running 10 by myself, I was pretty much ready to bring somebody on, an employee to help me with the guest messaging and vendor communication, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
with midterm rentals, since it's slowed down to like that 0.25 speed, I've been able to operate it all completely by myself. And instead of having turnovers every weekend, there's some months where I'll have zero turnovers across my entire portfolio. So of course, some months I might have three or four, maybe five, but it's that speed that's really turned down. So the systems are pretty much the same, just a lot slower pace.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense. And do you think that your use of Hospitable has changed over the years as well? So obviously you said that you've used hospitals since the start when you had short-term rentals, and you're still using it with mid-term rentals. Do you find that as your kind of portfolio and strategy has changed, your actual use of the software has changed a lot as well, or is it kind of consistent?
It's pretty consistent because I would say like one feature that I absolutely love is the integration with the Schlage smart locks.
Mhm.
So whether they're staying for 3 nights or 3 months, that stays the same. I like having the automated door codes. Um, I would say what I'm doing now is a lot more like I'd say direct bookings from like Furnish Finder. So I'm more so adding manual bookings onto Hospitable more
Mhm.
nowadays, whereas before it was like 99% Airbnb and VRBO. Now it's a little bit more manual to do with like even insurance guests. We have, people whose houses catch on fire and they need a place to stay for 3 to 6 months. So I'm still manually doing it through Hospitable, but it takes like 1 minute to add them in, and that automatically generates the door codes, the check-in messages, notifies my cleaning team. So yeah, the functionality hasn't really changed for me really at all.
Nice. And then kind of thinking about your experience between, running short-term rentals and mid-term rentals now, where do you think that you see, systems typically break down, or what typically breaks first if you're not kind of on the ball?
For midterm rentals,
For both, I guess. So, just have you seen kind of a similarity between the two, or are there kind of different focuses that you need to be, thinking about?
yeah, I would say honestly pretty similar in terms of systems go. Um, the one big difference I would say that I've been kind of toying with is the pricing automations. And I've always used kind of Hospitable as the middle point for pricing. With short term rentals, I was using Price Labs. I know you guys now have a new feature that helps with those automated pricing. I
Mhm.
haven't found a need for that just yet with the midterm rental side because my pricing is pretty consistent, every single night. It's really those minimum night stays that are different. And I would say that's like the biggest operational system, at least on the back end of the whole thing, is minimum night stay settings. And again, super nice to just change in Hospitable and it will change on Airbnb. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of the main difference.
No, that makes sense. And then I guess, for someone, thinking of transitioning from short-term rental to mid-term stays, how do you think that affects, messaging, maybe your calendar rules, and some other automation elements?
For sure. And what I would say too on people who are like who've only done short-term rental and are even curious about midterm rental, what I would say and what I do for some of my properties is I'll run them as short-term rentals in the summertime or whatever peak
Mm.
season you're in. But my properties are that I run as short-term rentals are like lake houses. So those do great during the summertime. And I run them, through Hospitable as normal. The only difference in my operations is I change my minimum night stay settings and I tweak my prices a little bit more, and that's where like Price Labs or Hospitable's price automation comes in. But during the winter time or whatever off season it is for the host listening, that's when you can experiment with midterm rentals if it's something you're interested in. So I always like to give an example, like in those markets, like for example, my properties that are lake houses. During the winter time, it's completely dead. I can usually bank on getting a Thanksgiving booking or a Christmas booking, but other weekends are really tough to get because no one's
Yeah.
coming. So those are kind of the types of markets where it's a real easy no-brainer to at least try to do a midterm rental. And basically the easiest way to start is just changing your minimum night stay settings to basically only allow for at least a 7, 14, 21, or 30 night stay at your property.
Mm, that makes sense. Okay, nice. And then also you just launched your own podcast, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Maybe you can tell us a bit more about the show there, and what was the kind of the gap in the market, the reason that you thought that this new podcast was needed.
For sure. Yeah. So the midterm rental show, new podcast I launched because, well, I guess when I was starting out in the short term rental space, so many great podcasts on the short term rental side, like so many great ones. And then on the other side with long term rentals, so many great podcasts on that front. On the midterm rental side, the ones that are out there are really good, but there weren't that many podcasts specifically talking about midterm rentals.
Mm,
And I think even though the changes between short term and midterm is so slight, like you can literally turn your operation from short term to midterm in a matter of minutes by literally just changing your minimum stay settings. Now, ideally, yes, there's more that you ideally change, but to start, it's as simple as just that. I just felt like there are some other nuances that are just important to talk about that weren't being talked about in one central place. So I decided to do it.
nice, I love it. And then you also launched a private community for midterm rental operators, right? What kind of questions or challenges are members kind of bringing up there and discussing?
Yeah. So kind of what I was mentioning with like the new like the small differences between short term and midterm.
Yeah.
So for example, and even the other thing too is even the difference between midterm and long term rentals. So one question that popped up recent, people were talking about should I let my guests tour the units, tour the house before they book?
Mm,
Now with short term rentals, 99% of the time, I'm not letting anyone tour, especially if they're going through Airbnb or VRBO. I've had that request before, and I would say overall, no, it's not happening. With midterm rentals, that's one thing where it is more common if it's through like a insurance company or sometimes furnish finder. But again, some small nuances are kind of those main questions that are being asked. Again, with like lease extensions, that's another one where people, that are more short-term rental minded don't really think about the actual lease because yes, people have like rental agreements, but they're not formal leases like we have in midterm rentals. So just so many little questions that pop up that you might not even think of if you just run a short-term rental, or even if you also run long-term rentals. The midterm rental is just like this awkward middle gap that creates so many of these little questions.
I see, that makes sense. And then I guess just kind of out of interest, across podcasting, coaching, co-hosting, what would you say is kind of the differentiator between an operator that maybe stalls out and one that is actually able to kind of scale to the next level in the same way that you've done?
For sure. Yeah, one of the things that I've been like my eyes have been on for literally since I begun was I use AirDNA, or I really used it more heavily in the beginning to look at different market data. And there's definitely better market data for short-term rentals than there is for midterm rentals. But one thing that I've seen is I mean, I haven't checked this in a few months, but in basically every market, there is AirDNA shows a graph of the inventory in a certain market. So what I've seen consistently throughout the years in every market that I've looked in, the inventory supply goes up for a couple months, 6 months, maybe up to a year. Then it dips down by like it lowers by like 20%. And then it goes back up and then it goes back down. So I've seen the kind of this roller coaster. And when I was in the short-term rental world, it was the same thing. Midterm rental, again, same thing. There's no hard data on it, but I know it's the same for midterm rentals. What I've kind of, I guess, gained from that is the people that are most successful in this business are the ones that are in it for the long term. whether you're doing short-term rental or you're doing midterm rental, if you're expecting every single month to be a new record-breaking month, this is not the business for you. So my kind of mindset that was with short-term rentals, and same thing for midterm rentals, is I'm in it for the long haul. If there's a bad month, which there's plenty of bad months or two, that's not going to deter me into just fire selling my entire portfolio. So patience is definitely key. This is not a get rich quick scheme. This is not none of that. You have to be in it for the long haul if you're looking to really just outlast everybody. And if you need to hit a record month in order to sleep well at night, then again, not the business for you. So that's definitely helped my mindset, especially when there's months that are slower. Like typically with midterm, one of the reasons why people like it is because it's generally a lot more steady throughout the entire year, versus short-term rentals has its peaks and valleys, but midterm rentals do as well. Now they're not as dramatic as short-term rentals, the dips and such, but they're still there, and you just can't let a couple months dictate this asset that you bought and your investment for years and years to come.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Always looking at that long-term view. Good. I like it. So I'm going to switch things up slightly now, give you a few quickfire questions before we wrap up the podcast. So 7 questions for you here. Try to keep your answers short. First thing that comes top of your mind. Let's go for it. So who are midterm rentals perfect for?
Midterm rentals are perfect for people who don't want as much work or I guess volatility as short-term rentals, but they want a little bit more cash flow than just a traditional long-term rental.
Nice. But who should not do midterm rentals?
You should not do midterm rentals if you are somebody who likes creating crazy experiences for guests, like hot tubs, murals. That's not what midterm rentals are about.
Nice, makes sense. Okay. And what would you say the biggest advantage MTRs have over STRs right now?
Biggest advantage, I would say, number 1, overall less saturated, and number 2, overall more stability.
That's okay. And we talked about expenses earlier. What's the most overlooked expense in midterm rentals?
Most overlooked expense, probably going to be utilities.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one actually. What's one hospitable feature that makes midterm rentals easier than people expect?
Ooh, that's a tough one because I like them all. I would say the communication with the cleaners, just sending out that automated message, it really saves a lot of back and forth between the cleaners. They have the schedules and it's done.
Nice, okay. And what's one question you answer over and over again from new MTR operators?
Ooh, one question that I answer over and over again is probably about which market. Like people always ask me, Bailey, what market is best for midterm rentals? That's one that I constantly get.
Nice, okay. And then final one, what advice would you give someone debating STRs versus MTRs right now?
Yeah, my advice would be, again, I kind of shared the pros and cons, but just also know you don't have to just pick one and not do the other. You can kind of take that hybrid approach, which depending on the market that you're in could work even better than just doing midterm or just doing short term.
Nice. Yeah, I like that very much. I think that having that duality is a very good option to have. So why not? Good, great. So one final question, not a quick one. You can take your time on this one. Where can listeners find the Midterm Rental Show and learn more about you and the community if they want to learn more about midterm rentals in general?
For sure. So the places that I'm most active on social media is my YouTube channel and Instagram. So you can just look up Bailey Kramer. I should pop up. And from there, I have links to my podcast and my community, and pretty much like I have so many free resources that I give out to that basically cover the gambit when it comes to midterm rentals and getting started, and also for people that already have short-term rentals and that are looking to transition to midterm rentals as well.
Nice, awesome. And we'll drop some links to those social and podcasts and everything in the show notes as well, so everyone can find them there. Sweet. Thank you so much, Bailey. Been a pleasure speaking with you.
Yep, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with myself and Bailey. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and listen out for more Hospitable Hosts podcast episodes coming soon.